They say time heals all wounds. They're wrong. Some wounds remain open forever, bleeding through the years, through the centuries. My name is Nikola Brown, and I'm a chrononaut. I've walked through history, witnessed humanity's greatest triumphs and darkest hours. I've stood in the shadows of emperors and kings, watched civilizations rise and fall. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the night of April 14th, 1912. The night I fell in love with a woman on the Titanic. The night I learned that some people are worth breaking all the rules for, even when you know you can't save them. The chrono module on my wrist vibrated softly as the temporal field stabilized around me. One moment I was in the white, sterile chamber of the Institute of Chrononautics in 2247, and the next I was pressed against the wall of a narrow corridor in the depths of the RMS Titanic. The transition always left me slightly dizzy, my body adjusting to the temporal displacement, but I'd learned to hide it well over the years. I breathed deeply, filling my lungs with air that smelled of coal smoke, machine oil, boiled cabbage, and the salty tang of the Atlantic Ocean. Beneath it all was something else, something I'd learned to recognize in my travels, the smell of hope. 2,000 souls packed into this floating palace of steel and wood, all dreaming of America, of new beginnings, of futures they would never see. I adjusted my brown coat, feeling the weight of the chronofiber equipment woven into its lining. To anyone looking, I was just another passenger, perhaps a merchant or businessman traveling in second class. The stubble on my chin was 3 days old, deliberately cultivated to fit the era. My light brown hair was slicked back in the style of 1912, and my green eyes absorbed every detail of my surroundings with the practiced observation of someone who had seen too much history unfold. My mission was straightforward. Document the sinking of the Titanic, observe evacuation procedures, collect data on human response to catastrophic disaster. Preservation of the timeline was absolute. Under no circumstances was I to interfere with events. I'd done missions like this before. The Great Fire of London, the eruption of Vesuvius, the fall of Constantinople. I knew how to remain invisible, how to watch tragedy unfold without letting it touch me. I thought I was prepared. I was a fool. The corridor was cramped, lined with doors leading to third-class cabins. Electric lights flickered overhead, a modern marvel for the poor immigrants crammed into this section of the ship. Somewhere above me, I could hear the distant sounds of music, the first-class orchestra playing for the wealthy elite dining on caviar and champagne. Down here, the sounds were different. Babies crying, laughter in Italian, Polish, and Irish accents, the clatter of cheap dishes, the rhythmic throb of the massive engines pushing the ship through the calm Atlantic waters at 22 knots. I checked my chrono module. The display showed the current time, 8:47 p.m. In less than 3 hours at 11:40 p.m., the Titanic would strike an iceberg. 2 hours and 40 minutes after that, at 2:20 a.m., she would slide beneath the waves, taking more than 1,500 people with her. I had a lot of work ahead of me. I needed to position myself to observe key moments, the impact, the evacuation, the final plunge. I needed to record data, take measurements, document everything for the historical archives. But first, I needed to get my bearings. The ship was enormous, and despite having memorized deck plans and passenger lists, nothing fully prepared you for the reality of navigating a vessel this size. I started walking, heading toward one of the common areas where I could observe without drawing attention. That's when I heard her voice. "You there, sir? Please, I need help." I turned and time stopped. Not metaphorically, not in some poetic sense. Time actually stopped for me in that moment, my brain short-circuiting, all systems shutting down except the part that registered the woman running toward me down the corridor. She was beautiful, not in the polished, artificial way of women from my time, but in a raw, vital way that made my chest tighten. Her dark brown hair was loosely pinned up, strands escaping to frame a face flushed with effort and worry. Her eyes were the color of the ocean on a clear day, that impossible blue that seems lit from within. She wore a simple white blouse and a long navy skirt, practical clothing that marked her as working class, but she moved with a grace that would have suited any ballroom. She carried a medical bag, the kind doctors used, and her expression was one of focused urgency. "Sir, please, I'm a nurse. There's a child in cabin D28 with a high fever. I need someone strong to help me move him to a cooler area. His father doesn't speak English and I can't make him understand. Can you help me?" I should have said no. Should have made an excuse and disappeared into the crowd. Chrononauts don't get involved. We observe. We document. We don't touch. Don't interact. Don't form connections. It's the first rule, the iron law, the thing they hammer into you from day one of training. But when those blue eyes fixed on mine, when I saw the desperation and determination there, I found myself saying, "Of course, lead the way." Her face lit up with relief and gratitude. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm Eleanor, by the way. Eleanor Ashford. But everyone calls me Ellie. Nikola Brown," I said, falling into step beside her as she hurried down the corridor. "You're a nurse?" "Trained in London," she said, navigating the maze of passages with practiced ease. "I'm emigrating to America. I have a position waiting for me at a hospital in New York. If we get there, of course." She glanced at me, and I caught something in her expression. Worry. Fear, quickly masked. "Sorry, that was foolish. Of course we'll get there. The ship is unsinkable, everyone says so." The word hit me like a physical blow. Unsinkable. That damned word, repeated like a prayer by everyone aboard, from the captain to the lowliest stoker. The arrogance of it, the tragic irony. We reached cabin D28, and Ellie pushed the door open without knocking. Inside, a small room was packed with people. A man and woman, clearly the parents, hovered over a small bunk where a boy of perhaps 5 lay sweating and shivering. 2 other children, slightly older, watched with wide, frightened eyes from a corner. The air was stifling, hot and stuffy, smelling of sickness and fear. Ellie immediately went to the child, placing her hand on his forehead, checking his pulse. She spoke in what sounded like Polish, her pronunciation careful but clear. The mother responded in a flood of words, gesturing frantically. Ellie nodded, then turned to me. "He's burning up with fever. We need to get him somewhere cooler, bring his temperature down. The father thinks moving him will make it worse, but he'll die if we leave him in this heat. I need you to help me carry him." I went to the bunk and lifted the boy gently. He was lighter than I expected, his small body trembling with fever. The father started to protest, but Ellie spoke to him in Polish, her voice firm but kind, and he reluctantly stepped aside. We carried the child into the corridor, and Ellie led us to a small storage area that was noticeably cooler. She had me lay him on a makeshift bed of folded blankets, then immediately set to work, applying cool compresses, administering something from a small vial in her medical bag. "Talk to him," she told me without looking up. "In English, it doesn't matter if he understands, just keep talking." The sound of a calm voice helps. So I talked. I told the boy about the ship, about the ocean, about the stars above. I told him about America, about the tall buildings and wide streets, about opportunities and dreams. And as I spoke, watching Ellie work with focused intensity, her hands steady and sure, I felt something shift inside me, something dangerous. After 20 minutes, the boy's fever began to break. His shivering lessened, his breathing steadied. Ellie sat back, relief evident on her face. "He's going to be okay now." The fever was from an ear infection, I think. I gave him something for the pain and to help him sleep. The parents should keep him cool and give him plenty of water. We returned the sleeping child to his grateful parents, who tried to press money into Ellie's hands. She refused, speaking gently in Polish, and they settled for kissing her hands and thanking her profusely. When we stepped back into the corridor, Ellie leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. "Long day?" I asked. She laughed, but it sounded tired. "Long life. I've been treating people since we left Southampton. Seasickness mostly, but also infections, injuries, 1 woman in labor. You'd think on a ship so modern, so luxurious, there would be proper medical facilities for 3rd class. But of course there aren't. Just me and a bag of supplies I bought with my own money." "You're good at it," I said. "What you do? You're very good." She opened her eyes and looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something there that made my pulse quicken. Curiosity, interest. "You're different," she said. "Most men I meet wouldn't have helped." They'd have made excuses, said they were too busy or too important. But you just said yes. Why? I should have lied. Should have given some bland, forgettable answer. Instead, I told the truth. Because you asked. Because it was the right thing to do. Because that boy needed help, and I could provide it. She smiled, and it transformed her face. You're either very kind or very naive, Nikola Brown. I haven't decided which yet. Maybe both, I said. And she laughed. A real laugh this time, bright and genuine. Are you traveling alone? She asked, starting to walk, and I fell into step beside her. We seemed to be heading toward the upper decks, toward fresh air and open space. I am. First class? Second? Does it matter? She looked at me, taking in my clothes, my bearing. You dress like second class, but you don't act like it. There's something about you. You're educated, cultured, but you don't have that arrogance that comes with old money. You're a mystery, Mr. Brown. I could say the same about you, Miss Ashford. A nurse with medical training, emigrating to America alone. That's not common for a woman in 1912. Her expression darkened slightly. I'm running away if you want the truth. From England, from my past, from a man I was engaged to. She looked away, her voice going flat. He was respectable, wealthy, from a good family. He was also cruel, controlling, and violent. I broke off the engagement 2 months ago. He didn't take it well. So I'm running to America, to a new life where he can't find me. I felt anger surge through me, hot and protective. Did he hurt you? He tried to own me, she said simply. My thoughts, my choices, my future. When I refused to be owned, he became dangerous. So I left. I used every penny I'd saved to buy passage on this ship and secure a position in New York. This voyage is my escape, my chance to be free. We'd reached the third-class promenade, a modest open area at the stern of the ship where third-class passengers could take the air. It was crowded despite the cold. Couples walking arm in arm, children playing tag, old men smoking pipes and telling stories. The sun had set hours ago, and the sky was a black dome studded with more stars than most of these people had ever seen, unobscured by city lights. The ocean stretched infinitely in all directions, dark and calm, reflecting the starlight like scattered diamonds. Ellie walked to the railing and leaned against it, breathing deeply. I love this, she said softly. The vastness, the sense of possibility. For 5 days now I've been in between. No longer English, not yet American. Just me, existing in this liminal space where the past can't touch me and the future hasn't arrived. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, I said. And I meant it. It was exactly how chrononauts felt. Always between times, never fully belonging anywhere. We stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars, feeling the vibration of the engines through the deck. Around us, people laughed and talked, living their last hours unknowing. I could feel the weight of that knowledge pressing down on me, suffocating. In less than 3 hours, this peaceful night would become a nightmare. These laughing children would be screaming in terror. These couples would be torn apart. This beautiful, impossible ship would become a tomb. You look sad, Ellie said, watching me. Distant. Just thinking about the future, I said. About how quickly things can change. She nodded slowly. I had a dream last night, a terrible dream. The ship was sinking, breaking apart. People were drowning in freezing water. There was so much screaming. She shuddered, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. It felt so real. I woke up crying and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a nightmare, that it was a warning. My heart stopped. Ellie, I know, it's foolish. This ship is unsinkable. Everyone says so. The designers, the captain, the newspapers, it's just a silly dream. But she didn't sound convinced. She sounded terrified. I wanted to tell her. God, how I wanted to tell her. To take her hand and lead her to a lifeboat right then. Damn the timeline, damn the consequences. But it was only 9:30 p.m. The iceberg was more than 2 hours away. If I started evacuating people now, I'd cause panic, might actually make things worse. And more than that, I'd contaminate the timeline in ways that could ripple through history. So instead I said carefully, dreams can be powerful things. Sometimes there are minds telling us to be prepared, to be vigilant. If something did happen, if there was an emergency, what would you do? She looked at me strangely. I'd help. I'm a nurse. It's what I do. I'd help however I could. What if someone told you to get in a lifeboat, to save yourself? I'd argue. I'd say I was needed. I'd refuse to leave people who needed me. She paused, studying my face. Why are you asking me this, Nikola? You're scaring me. I'm sorry. I don't mean to. I want you to promise me something. If there is an emergency tonight, if something does happen, I need you to promise me you'll do exactly what you're told. No arguments, no hesitation. Can you promise me that? She was silent for a long moment, her blue eyes searching mine. You know something, she said finally. Don't you? Something you're not telling me. I know that life is unpredictable, I said, which was technically true. I know that we should be prepared for anything. And I know that your dream might have been trying to tell you something important. She reached out and took my hand, her fingers cold from the night air, but her grip strong. You're very strange, Nikola Brown. But I like you. You're kind and honest, and those are rare qualities. So yes, I promise. If something happens tonight, I'll do as I'm told. But you have to promise me something too. What? That you'll survive. Whatever happens, whoever you really are, wherever you've come from, you'll live through this night. Promise me. The words hit me like a hammer. She knew. Maybe not the specific details, maybe not the particulars, but on some level, she understood that I was different, that I didn't belong here. And instead of being frightened, instead of calling me crazy, she was asking me to survive. I promise, I said. And I meant it. We stayed on the promenade for another hour, talking about everything and nothing. She told me about growing up in a small village outside London, about her mother who died when she was 12, about teaching herself to read medical texts and convincing a local doctor to take her on as an apprentice. I told her carefully edited stories about my travels, about places I'd been and things I'd seen, always framing them as past experiences, never revealing the truth. But in a way, I was more honest with her than I'd been with anyone in years. I told her about loneliness, about the burden of knowledge, about the weight of watching terrible things unfold and being unable to stop them. You sound like you're carrying the world on your shoulders, she said at one point. Like Atlas holding up the sky. Sometimes it feels that way, I admitted. Then let it fall, she said simply. Just for tonight. Just for a few hours. Be Nikola Brown, a man on a ship, talking to a woman under the stars. Let the world hold itself up for a while. So I did. For one perfect hour I forgot about the mission, forgot about the timeline, forgot about everything except the woman beside me and the sound of her laughter when I told her about the time I got lost in a market in Istanbul and ended up buying 3 chickens and a rug I didn't need. But time, as always, moved forward. The chrono module on my wrist vibrated gently, a warning I'd become all too familiar with. 11 p.m., 40 minutes until impact. I need to go, I said reluctantly. I have things I need to do. Disappointment crossed her face. Of course, I should get some sleep anyway. Big day tomorrow. We arrive in New York in 3 days and I want to be well rested. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Will I see you again? Tomorrow, maybe? Tomorrow. The word hung between us like a lie. For most people on this ship, there would be no tomorrow. Just cold water and darkness and death. Ellie, I said, taking both her hands in mine. Listen to me carefully. I need you to remember your promise. If something happens tonight, anything, you do exactly what you're told. You get in a lifeboat if someone tells you to. You don't argue, don't hesitate. You save yourself. Do you understand? She was staring at me with those incredible blue eyes and I saw tears forming. You know something. You know something terrible is going to happen. I can't explain. I wish I could, but I can't. Just please, please remember your promise. She pulled me close and kissed me. It was desperate, fierce, tasting of salt and fear and goodbye. When she pulled away, she whispered, I'll remember. And you remember yours. Survive. Find me in New York. Prove there's still hope in this world. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd, and I let her go because I had no choice. I spent the next 40 minutes moving through the ship, positioning myself to observe. I went to the bridge and watched the officers scanning the horizon, relaxed and confident, commenting on how calm the sea was, how clear the night. I went to the radio room and listened to the operators sending messages, joking about ice warnings from other ships, dismissing them as routine. I went down to the boiler rooms and saw the stokers working in hellish heat, shoveling coal into the furnaces that fed the engines. Everywhere I went, I saw life, confidence, blissful ignorance. At 11:30 p.m., I positioned myself on the forward deck near the bow. The night was bitterly cold now, well below freezing. My breath misted in the air. The ocean was like glass, perfectly calm, reflecting the starlight. There was no moon. The darkness was absolute beyond the ship's lights. I checked the chrono module. 11:38 p.m. 2 minutes. I could feel it coming, a distortion in the probability field, the universe holding its breath before catastrophe. The temperature dropped even further. My chronofiber equipment registered the change, sensors picking up the massive block of ice ahead hidden in the darkness. 11:39 p.m. 1 minute. I gripped the railing, watching the horizon, and then I saw it. A shape in the darkness, a shadow against shadows, massive and wrong and inevitable. The iceberg. Iceberg right ahead. The shout came from the crow's nest, Frederick Fleet's voice carrying clearly in the silent night. The ship began to turn, slowly, ponderously, the rudder hard over, the engines reversing. But it was too late. It was always too late. The Titanic's massive momentum carried her forward, sliding along the ice, the contact almost gentle at first. Then came the sound, a grinding, a tearing that seemed to come from the depths of the ship's bones. The deck shuddered. Chunks of ice fell onto the forward deck, scattering like dice. Then silence. The engine stopped. The ship drifted. For a moment, nothing happened. Then passengers began to emerge from their cabins, confused, some in their nightclothes, some carrying chunks of ice as souvenirs, laughing about the strange interruption to their voyage. They had no idea, no conception of the gash that had been torn in the hull below the waterline, of the freezing seawater already flooding 6 compartments, more than the ship was designed to survive. I had maybe 2 hours before she went down. 2 hours to observe, document, and fulfill my mission. I moved through the ship like a ghost, recording everything. The passengers' initial confusion, the crew's growing realization that the unthinkable was happening, the first efforts to uncover the lifeboats, clumsy and disorganized. I documented every moment, every detail, maintaining emotional distance as I'd been trained. But then at 12:15 a.m., as I stood on the boat deck, I saw her. Ellie was helping load women and children into lifeboat number 7. Her face was pale but determined, her voice calm as she reassured frightened passengers, helped children aboard, translated for those who didn't speak English. She'd broken her promise, or perhaps she was keeping it in a different way, helping others before saving herself. An officer grabbed her by the arm. "You too, miss. Get in the boat." "Not yet," she protested. "There are more. Now," he ordered, and practically pushed her into the boat. She looked up, her eyes scanning the deck, and found me. For a moment, our gazes locked across the distance. She raised one hand in farewell, or perhaps in plea. I wanted to run to her, wanted to say goodbye properly, wanted to, but I couldn't. I shouldn't. I stood frozen where I was, watching as the boat began to descend. "I love you," she called across the growing distance. The words tore through me like knives. I wanted to shout back, wanted to say I loved her too, that these few hours with her had meant more than years of my own life. But I couldn't. I couldn't let those words exist in the universe. So I just watched in silence as Lifeboat 7 descended into the darkness, carrying her away from the dying ship. At least she'd be safe. At least she'd survive this night. But then, even at a distance, I saw movement in the boat. A figure standing, gesturing. And then, horrified, I watched Ellie begin to climb back up the rope. "No," I whispered. "Ellie, no, please." She reached the deck, pulling herself over the railing despite the officer's protests. She'd left the lifeboat. She'd come back. I pushed through the crowd, desperate to reach her, but there were too many people, too much chaos. By the time I got to where she'd been, she'd already disappeared into the depths of the ship, going back to help evacuate more passengers. I searched for her frantically for the next hour, but the ship was collapsing into chaos. The deck tilted at an increasingly steep angle. Water rose in the corridors. People screamed, cried, prayed. I checked the remaining lifeboats, searched the lower decks, ran through flooding corridors. At 2 a.m., with only 20 minutes remaining before the final plunge, I finally found her. She was on the boat deck, helping with the last collapsible boat. Her dress was soaked, her hair loose and wild, her face pale with exhaustion and cold. But she was still working, still helping. "Ellie!" I shouted, running to her. She turned, and her face lit up. "Nikola, thank God. Help me, we need to get more people in this boat before—" "You need to get in that boat," I interrupted, grabbing her shoulders. "Now. This is the last one. There are still people who need— Ellie, please." My voice broke. "Please get in the boat. Survive this." She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw understanding unfold in her eyes. "You're not going to survive, are you? That's why you're so desperate. You know you're going to die. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you live." "It matters to me." Tears were streaming down her face now. "How can you ask me to live knowing you're going to die? How can you expect me to do that?" The deck tilted violently. People screamed, grabbing onto anything they could. The officer at the boat shouted, "Last call! Everyone aboard now!" "Go," I said, pushing her toward the boat. "Go, Ellie. Live your life. Go to America. Work at the hospital. Save people. Don't let this night destroy you. Promise me." "Nikola, promise." "I promise," she sobbed. And then she turned and climbed into the boat. The officer immediately began lowering it. I stood at the railing, watching the boat descend, watching Ellie pulled away. She looked up, her eyes fixed on mine until the darkness swallowed her. And then I was alone. I moved to the stern as the ship began its final plunge. The deck tilted at an impossible angle now. Water poured over the forward decks. The stern section began to rise slowly at first, then faster, the massive propellers emerging from the water. My chrono module vibrated. Time for extraction. I could activate it now, jump back to 2247, leave this tragedy behind. But not yet. I needed to document until the end. It was my mission, my duty. With a sound like the world breaking apart, the ship split in two. The crack ran down the hull, and the forward section plunged down, dragging hundreds of souls with it. The stern stood vertical, suspended in the air for one impossible moment, silhouetted against the field of stars. I activated the chrono module. The temporal field began to form around me, reality bending. I took one last look at the dark ocean, searching for the lifeboats, for some sign of Ellie. "Live," I whispered. "Live and be happy." The world spun, and then I was no longer on the Titanic. I materialized in the Institute's extraction chamber. The lights were too bright, the air too clean. My clothes were still damp from ocean spray, my face still numb from the cold. The debriefing team was waiting, ready to download my data, collect my report, process another successful mission. "Welcome back, Chrononaut Brown," said Director Chen. "Mission status?" "Complete," I said automatically. "All data points collected. Sinking documented from impact to final plunge." "Excellent. Any difficulties with timeline preservation?" I thought of Ellie, of helping with the sick child, of our hour on the deck, of begging her to get in a lifeboat. "None," I lied. "The timeline remains intact." "Good work. Take a few days off, then we have another mission lined up for you. The Battle of Waterloo. You leave next Tuesday." I nodded and went to my quarters. I sat in the dark for hours, unable to sleep, unable to stop seeing Ellie's face, hearing her last words. Eventually, I pulled up the historical records. I needed to know. Eleanor Ashford, age 24, nurse. Initially placed in Lifeboat 7, returned to ship to help with evacuation. Placed in last collapsible boat at 2:05 a.m. survivor. Emigrated to New York as planned. Worked at Mount Sinai Hospital for 42 years. Never married. Died 1954, age 66, of natural causes. She'd survived. She'd lived a long life. She'd fulfilled her dreams, but she never married. And something about that detail broke me. I continued being a chrononaut for another 3 decades. Waterloo, Gettysburg, Hiroshima. I witnessed the rise and fall of empires, watched the best and worst of humanity. I always maintained my distance, always preserved the timeline, always followed the rules. But I never forgot Ellie. I never stopped seeing her blue eyes in the dark, hearing her laughter, feeling the warmth of her hand in mine. And every night before I slept, I whispered the words I didn't say when I had the chance. I love you too. The rules exist for a reason. The timeline must be preserved. Chrononauts don't interfere, don't get involved, don't save people who are meant to die. I followed the rules. I did my job. I kept my distance. And some nights, I still wonder if I made the right choice. They say time heals all wounds. They're wrong. Some wounds remain open forever, bleeding through the years, through the centuries. My name is Nikola Brown, and I'm a chrononaut. I've walked through history, witnessed humanity's greatest triumphs and darkest hours, and I fell in love with a woman on the Titanic. I let her go, because it was my duty, because it was the right thing to do. But God, how it hurt, and it still hurts, and it always will.